Hello everybody out there in quarantine land. So I'm making this for AP government and also GNTC government. Sorry it's taking me so long to get this done. I've been trying to figure out how to do it. I don't know why it won't work on the computer. Like I got no volume on the computer at the school, so I'm doing it from home. Um, it's a pretty good one to have a couple of days worth of stuff to do on because I've just jabbered in class quite a bit. Um, we're looking at Plato. Well, the last few days we're going Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Locke, and that's as far as we've gotten the last couple of days. So that's as far as I'm going to. Tomorrow in class I'm going Rousseau. So I'll try to make another. Some other guys. All right. So the first guy we're looking at is Plato. He writes a book called The Republic. It's a big, long attempt to define the word justice. When he gets through defining the word, you're not sure if this place, he creates this perfect city, utopia, he would say, or a republic, a perfect form of government, a republic. And when he gets through, you're not quite sure if he's serious or not, and that some of the things he says seem awfully extreme. Then he also kind of talks about what makes for a good person, justice in like a government, justice within a person's soul is really what we got going. And hey, I'm a little, voice goes, we're on extended day, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so in the first chapter of the Republic, he encounters three different people at like a party. Socrates is your main character in the Republic. It's just about a bunch of conversations Socrates has with other people about justice. So he meets this old fellow named Cephalus, who tells him he doesn't mind being old because he doesn't get worked up about anything, and his word is his bond, and he doesn't know anybody anything. And so he says, well, so you're saying justice is telling the truth and paying your debts. And Cephalus says, yeah, I think so. Socrates has an objection, and his objection is kind of a what if scenario. Well, what if your friend loans you a weapon, and so you owe your friend a weapon, meanwhile he's gone nuts and he thinks his wife's cheating on him? Should you really pay the debt back in that scenario? So there's a situation where maybe you shouldn't. So Cephalus just kind of says, oh, Socrates, you come up with the wildest things, and walks on off. So then his son Polemarchus kind of describes justice as loyalty. Help your friends and hurt your enemies. And Socrates says, well, sometimes you're wrong about who your friends are, and so you end up helping your enemies and hurting your friends. All right, then this guy Thrasymachus comes along, gets all fired up, and he says, I don't really think there's any such thing as justice. So whoever the toughest guys around, the bully says it is. So whoever the guys in charge say it is. There's no real justice. And the only people who really carry on about justice are like weak people want the government like take up for them. So Socrates says, yeah, but sometimes, the strongest people make mistakes. Hitler could have been in charge of Europe if he just hadn't have invaded Russia. So again, similar objections. Sometimes, the strong are just wrong about what's in their interest. Okay, so then you got these guys, Glaucon and Adimantus. They're brothers, and they talk to they're talking to Socrates. And so first off, Glaucon comes up with this story of the ring of Gyges, which if you put it on, it'll make you invisible and you can do whatever you want to. And so when we consider this question, this hypothetical ring, we want to ask ourselves, well, what would we do if we had the ring, and what would most people do? And if we think about it very long, we kind of think most people would do something bad that they want to get away with, which suggests to us the troubling notion that maybe good people just do good things so they can make a lot of money or make good grades or have people pat them on the back or that sort of thing. They're not doing the right thing because it's the right thing. And so then Adimantus, his brother, comes along and says, imagine a good man who's kind of clumsy and always appears to be a bad man, a just man who always appears to be unjust. And he's so bad at enhancing his reputation that everybody kind of turns on him and kills him, executes him. He goes through a painful death. And then another man who's perfectly unjust but's kind of cunning and good at looking just. And he asks Socrates, well, what I want to know is which one's happier? Because if the unjust man is happier, well, then justice is not its own reward. And so Socrates says, man, those of y'all tell me great stories. I'm not sure what the answer to your question is, but maybe what we should do is look at justice in a bigger place, in a government, rather than in a person. And because we can see things better when they're bigger, we can understand justice better in a person. So he says, imagine this perfect place, a republic. And he says, I think this republic's going to have 3 characteristics. All right, so, hey, let me take a breath. Y'all answer those questions for a second. And so we have the description of the republic. So it's going to have 3 things. First off, you're going to have gender equality. Women are going to be equal to men. To our notion today, well, no big deal. But for the Greeks, that was really, really revolutionary. So Socrates' audience would be troubled by this. And so then he's going to say, hey, you can't have families either because you may love your mom more than you love your country. And so there'd be like this big eugenic kind of mating season every year in his hypothetical republic. And the philosophers are going to rule, and like the kids get raised in this big giant orphanage. And pretty soon you start thinking, hey, this perfect place, this republic he's describing, may not be a place where anyone would actually want to live. So then Socrates says, well, you just think that because you're like prisoners in a cave. So he says, imagine this cave. And it's got these guys in it, and they're chained to where they can only see the wall of the cave. And back behind them, there's a light shining into the cave. And then there's these objects traveling along this wall of the cave, and all they can see is like the reflections of the objects. And so all they know is appearance. They don't know reality. They don't know truth. And so then one day one of them gets busted out of the cave, and he goes outside and he sees the sunlight. And he doesn't like it at first, but gradually his eyes adjust and he comes to know the truth, and the truth kind of sets him free, right? But then he's got to tell his buddies about it. If he goes back down in there and tells his buddies about it, they all think he's full of crap because they've never known anything but the appearances. And so Socrates says, well, you may not like my republic, but that's because you're prejudiced. You're just prisoners in a cave. All right. So then the question is that really the case? Or is there something really kind of messed up about his republic? And is it perhaps the case that he's just kind of kidding? Does he mean it, that this is really a perfect place? Or is he trying to show us that maybe if you get carried away with any idea like patriotism or equality or freedom, you'll end up in a place you really don't want to be. At any rate, whether or not the republic, the just republic in a city, is a well-ordered city, reason over spirit and desire is, for the Greeks, a well-ordered soul. You think about when you want to do the wrong thing and your reason tells you, hey, this is not the right thing to do, and you got to kind of force yourself not to do it. Or you got to force yourself to do your homework even though you feel like, watching TV or texting. So you know what the right thing to do is, and you kind of got to, there's this internal struggle that takes place. And so really, if you're winning those struggles, that's kind of saying that, you've got a well-ordered republic within your own soul, within yourself. All right, and so that's kind of the republic there. All right. Things don't turn out too well for Socrates. He gets accused of corrupting the youth, making them not very patriotic by kind of making fun of the leaders in the city, and also impiety. He's not religious enough. He kind of makes fun of the Greek gods. So he gets put on trial, and he claims to have spoken to God at this place called Delphi, where people went when they wanted to speak to God, and there's like an oracle there who spoke to God for them and would answer their questions. And he said he went there and he asked the oracle, who's the wisest man in Athens? The oracle said, well, he was. He said, well, that can't be because I don't know anything. The only wisdom I have is that I'm aware that I don't have all the answers. So then he says, well, I went to all the people with good reputations in ancient Greece. The politicians, well, they didn't know anything, so I was wiser than them because at least I knew I didn't know. I went to the artists, and they couldn't really explain their own work. They were creative, but they couldn't explain exactly what they were trying to say with their books and their poems and their songs. And then I went to the artisans, the people who could make things, and they had a particular wisdom, a particular knowledge how to make something, but they thought because they understood one thing, they understood everything, and in that sense, they were wrong. So only Socrates was aware of his own ignorance. So he's famous for saying, I know that I don't know, also famous for saying the unexamined life is not worth living, and these folks are living unexamined lives. All right, well, it doesn't turn, he makes everybody mad in the jury. They sentence him to drink hemlock, and he does it, so that's the end of Socrates. Okay, you might want to pause that and take a look at some of those questions. And I'm sending you this film on the Republic to take a look at. Okay, Plato's student was a guy named Aristotle. And so Plato's always, there's Plato there on the cover of the Republic. He's always pointing upward. He's like an idealist. And Aristotle's much more practical in his thinking. And Aristotle says you don't really want to attack the values of the people in the cave. You don't want to attack traditional values. Maybe just kind of alter them a little bit, slowly, gently lead them toward the light, encourage them to be a little better people. He always talks about the mean between extremes. So you can pause that. He says justice is a mean between extremes, and so you kind of go through all these different virtues, and you look at what might be the mean between extremes. For maybe courage is a mean between like cowardice. If you don't have any courage, you're a coward, and then if you have too much, well, you're reckless. You don't have any regard for your own safety. If you got no work ethic, you're lazy. But if you work all the time, it makes you kind of ornery and dull. And so you can kind of go through all these things and see how there might be a mean between extremes for each one of these. Okay. Aristotle's book is a book called Nicomachean Ethics. His son was named Nicomacheus, and so he put all Aristotle's works together in this work called the Ethics. And again, he's just really, really practical. And he says, what we all want is to be happy, to have a nice life, but also to have some integrity about us. Not to make money by being like a drug dealer, but to make money by being, a doctor or a teacher or a preacher or somebody who, does good things. And the way to do that is instill good habits in the young. And if you still good habits in the young, over time, they get to where they're wanting to do the right thing. Now, just because you want to do the right thing doesn't mean you'll do it, because you hadn't developed discernment yet. You hadn't developed practical reason. You haven't developed the judgment to know what the right thing to do is in a particular situation. And that takes time. That's why you got to be at least 35 years old to be president of the United States. And I got my pictures of great basketball players. And, with the game on the line, you want these guys to take the last shot because they've just taken 1,000,000 of these shots. So they've got muscle memory and judgment. So for the exact right way, the exact angle to take for these real important shots. And Aristotle says it's that way for a good man when he's trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. Let me take a breath. And then we got 3 more guys. So at this point, we're coming to modern political theory. Modern history starts in the year 1500, right around the time Columbus is coming. And modern political theory, unlike the ancients, is in no way concerned with encouraging good character. So Machiavelli, coming out of Italy, Italian, we kind of think of the mafia when we talk about power, and Italy says politics is about power, not being a good person. That he's giving advice to a leader, and he said his book's called The Prince, and he tells the prince that it's better to be feared than loved. If a leader's loved, people are going to think they can take advantage of him, walk all over him. If you kind of remember Jimmy Carter, he was just kind of seen as a soft leader, even though he's a really good man. And so, some of these guys, Nixon, Johnson, Clinton, and Trump, all were in one way or another kind of seen as Machiavellian, kind of ruthless political leaders. Machiavelli tells this story of the Duke and Ramiro de Orco. The Duke is this guy who gets put in charge of this out of control city where everybody's committing crimes right and left. So to get him under control, he brings in this mean guy named Ramiro de Orco and just kind of turns him loose for a few days. And he cracks people's heads or does whatever he has to do. And within a few days, hey, you've got order in the city. But then the problem is everybody hates the Duke for bringing in this cruel Ramiro guy. All right, so then the prince says one day the sun comes up and everybody comes out of their houses to see Ramiro de Orco laying in the town square with a bloody knife by his side. He's been cut in half. And the line says, and the people were stunned and satisfied. So think about that. I mean, the Duke's just ruthless. First off, he brings in this guy to clean house, and then when the guy does what he's been hired to do, he kills him. So I mean, people really fear this guy, but they don't hate him because he gets rid of the guy that they really do hate. So Machiavelli holds that up as an example for how to be an effective ruler, even though he's obviously an immoral and cruel and ruthless person. Okay, so then you go to these two guys who imagine kind of scientifically. They're kind of scientific political theorists. And they say, imagine a place with no government, the state of nature. And would you like to live there? So we're imagining this state of nature according to two people. Guy number one, and we'll go ahead and think about that. If you think it's a good idea, well, probably what you want is a weak government that doesn't tell you what to do, if you like the state of nature. If you think it's a bad idea, you need a strong government kind of telling you what to do. And if it's kind of in the middle, you need kind of a moderate government. All right, so you got Hobbes. Hobbes is guy number one, writes a book called Leviathan, comparing a big, giant, strong government to a sea monster. And he says, life in the state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. We're all scared to death that somebody's going to kill us if there's no authorities. And he says, hey, even big bad guys like these guys should be scared of little people like us, because when they go to sleep at night, we can sneak up on them and bash their skulls in or slit their throats. So everybody's just scared all the time in the state of nature. And the movie The Purge is kind of about that situation. And also the book Lord of the Flies takes these really well-behaved English private school kids, you put them on an island, and pretty soon they're all murderers. Okay, for Hobbes, the purpose of government is to keep us alive, meaning you obey any government. Even if the government's run by a dictator like Saddam Hussein here or Muammar Gaddafi. Saddam Hussein was overthrown by President George W. Bush. And this picture of kind of Iraq and almost a state of nature with no government suggests maybe Iraq was better off with a bad leader than no leader at all. And then Obama was responsible for the end of Gaddafi, and then Libya was kind of state of nature-y, and then things went badly there as well. All right, so that's kind of a Hobbes way of looking at things. All right, one more guy. So you got John Locke. He wrote a book. He's English. Both Hobbes and Locke are English. Wrote a book called Second Treatise of Government. And the second treatise says, well, the state of nature is not this murderous place. It's just kind of inconvenient, because if we're out in the middle of nature somewhere and we lay down with our coconuts beside us that we picked off a coconut tree and we take a nap, well, when we wake up, nobody's bashed our head in or slit our throat, but they may have stolen our coconuts. So your property is insecure in the state of nature. So, purpose of government is to protect your natural rights of life, liberty, property. And you only obey a good government, a government that's not tyrannical, that protects your natural rights. So here we have the picture of George Washington fighting for the Americans who have withdrawn their consent from the tyrannical British government because, taxation without representation and all that. All right, and so that's Locke. And so Paul's right there. And that, strangely enough, it took me a long time we talked about all this stuff. So you pick some good days to get quarantined, because what's that? That's about 25 or 30 minutes worth of stuff. But that's everything that we've covered so far.